Hi Reddit, I'm 36 and I'm not sure how to even start this. About a week ago, something happened that turned my entire world upside down. I was getting ready for bed, just brushing my teeth and scrolling through emails on my phone, when I heard someone knock at the door. It was almost midnight, which made it even stranger. I live in a pretty quiet neighborhood, and we don't get visitors at that hour. At first, I thought it might have been a delivery mistake or a lost Uber driver, so I looked through the peephole. Standing there was a teenage girl, maybe 16 or 17, in a hoodie and jeans, looking exhausted and scared. I cracked the door open, ready to tell her she had the wrong house, but then she said my name. Not my first name. My full name. The one I don't use publicly. I froze. No one outside of close family knows that name. Before I could say anything, she pulled something from her pocket and held it out to me, a photo. A really old photo. One I hadn't seen in over a decade. It was of my sister. My sister, Emily, who disappeared without a trace 10 years ago. She vanished one rainy September morning while walking to her community college classes. No signs of foul play, no confirmed sightings, no note. Just gone. And now here I was, standing in front of this girl who looked like a younger version of Emily, holding a photo I thought was long gone. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "I think you're my aunt." I couldn't breathe. I let her in, of course. Made her some tea, gave her a blanket. I was in total shock. She said her name was Mira. Her mother's name, she said, was Emily. No last name. No hometown. She claimed they'd been living off the grid, moving from state to state, always just ahead of someone. When I asked where Emily was now, Mira looked away. Then she said something that chilled me to the bone. "She's gone. And I need to tell you what really happened." I barely slept after Mira showed up. She crashed on the couch around 2 a.m., and I sat at the kitchen table just staring at that old photo of Emily. My hands were shaking. The photo wasn't just a random one. It was our photo, taken in my bedroom when we were teenagers. Emily was holding my cat, both of us grinning like idiots. I kept that photo hidden in an old shoebox with other childhood stuff. After she vanished, the shoebox became too painful to look at. But I never threw it out. So how did this girl, claiming to be my niece, get it? The next morning, Mira woke up early. She sat quietly at the table, staring into her tea like she was trying to decide if she should even talk to me. Then, just as I opened my mouth to ask her anything, she blurted it out. "She told me never to come looking for you. Not until she was gone." I asked her what she meant by gone. "Gone where? Dead?" Mira nodded slowly. She said Emily had passed away 2 weeks ago. Natural causes, she claimed, though it sounded vague. She said her mom had a heart condition and never trusted hospitals. Emily always believed that if they stepped too close to civilization, they'd be found. That's when Mira said the thing that's been echoing in my head ever since. She wasn't just hiding from a person, she was hiding from everyone. From you. From Grandma. From the police. From the world. And apparently, from a secret she never dared speak aloud. According to Mira, her mom told her that if anything ever happened to her, she was to come here, to me, and tell me the truth, the real reason she disappeared 10 years ago. Emily, she said, had been terrified of someone close to us. And that's when Mira asked me something I never thought I'd hear. "Did you ever wonder why she never called you? Not once? Even though she loved you more than anyone?" That hit hard. Because the truth is, yes, I have wondered. Every damn day. Mira reached into her backpack and pulled out a battered composition notebook. It was duct taped at the spine, the corners curled. She pushed it toward me like it was radioactive. "She wrote everything in here," she said. "But she made me promise not to read it. She said it was for you." My fingers were trembling as I opened the cover. Inside the first page, in Emily's familiar handwriting, were the words, "If you're reading this, I'm probably dead. And someone you trust is not who you think they are. And I swear to God." I felt the temperature drop in the room. I'll update soon with what I read inside that notebook. This rabbit hole is deeper than I ever imagined. That notebook sat on my kitchen table for hours. I kept pacing around it like it might explode. I didn't want to open it alone, but Mira had gone to lie down. She looked like she hadn't had a good night's sleep in weeks, maybe months. And honestly, I didn't want her seeing whatever was in there until I could make sense of it myself. So, sometime around 3 in the afternoon, I sat down with a pen and paper, took a deep breath, and opened to the first real page. The handwriting was messy, rushed, and full of crossouts. The first few pages were just entries about running, fear, exhaustion. Mentions of fake names. Bus stations. Cheap motels. It was like a diary from someone spiraling. But then the tone shifted. There was a date. It was about 6 months after she disappeared. And underneath it, in bold letters, I saw him again. She didn't name him at first, just said he was outside the gas station. I don't know if he recognized me. I didn't wait long enough to find out. Then a list of cities she crossed off. A note to herself not to stay anywhere for more than 2 nights. Then she wrote this. It wasn't about school. It wasn't even about freedom. I left because I knew no one would believe me. Because the second I said his name, they'd close ranks around him. They always did. That was the first time my blood ran cold. Because I knew what she was talking about, even before she said it. And when I turned the next page, it was right there. Don't trust Uncle Ryan. Whatever he says, it's a lie. I stared at those words for a long time. Uncle Ryan. Our mom's younger brother. The cool uncle. The one who always brought us little gadgets and games, who took us to movies, gave us rides when our parents were busy. The one we all trusted. The one who, if I'm being honest, had always made me feel just a little uneasy, even as a kid. Not enough to question him. Just enough to feel weird when we were alone. Emily's next entries got darker. More paranoid. She said she tried telling someone once, a teacher she trusted. But somehow, the story got twisted. The school called our parents. Uncle Ryan found out. And after that, she wrote, he made it very clear what would happen if I ever opened my mouth again. Emily was only 19 when she disappeared. I was 26. I thought she'd run off because she was overwhelmed. Because she wanted to escape our strict family. But now, reading these pages, I realized how blind I'd been. She hadn't run away from responsibility. She'd run away to survive. And the final thing I read before I had to stop was this. He's still out there. And if you're reading this, you need to keep Mira safe. He'll come looking for her. I don't know what to do next. I haven't told Mira any of this yet. And the worst part? Uncle Ryan still lives 20 minutes away. He was at my house 3 months ago for a barbecue. He hugged me, laughed, asked if I was seeing anyone new. He has no idea Mira is here. Or maybe he does. And that's what terrifies me. I didn't sleep again. After reading what Emily wrote about Uncle Ryan, I kept replaying every memory I had of him. And suddenly, little things I'd ignored started to feel sinister. Like how Emily used to flinch when he hugged her goodbye. How she'd always avoid being alone in a room with him. How she used to complain about feeling watched when he stayed over. I chalked it up to teenage moodiness. God, I hate myself for that now. I didn't know whether to tell Mira. But the next morning, she made the choice for me. She was standing in my hallway with that notebook in her hands. She'd read it. All of it. She looked like a ghost. She didn't say much, just asked if it was true. I told her I didn't know what happened exactly, but I believed her mom. Every word. Then Mira said something that made my stomach flip. There's more. I didn't bring everything. Turns out Emily had hidden a box. She'd told Mira before she died, if something happens to me, and you go to my sister, don't open the box until she tells you it's time. The box had been stored in a lock-up unit 2 hours from here. Mira had the key on a necklace she hadn't taken off since she arrived. She said she wasn't even sure what was inside. Just that her mom had always treated it like it was dangerous. So we drove out there. The storage unit was tiny and mostly empty except for an old plastic tote wrapped in duct tape. Inside were 2 things. A dusty camcorder and a small cassette labeled in black marker. Spring 2012, do not watch alone. I didn't want to watch it. Not really. But Mira said we had to. Together. So we took it home. Hooked it up to an old TV. Sat down. I was shaking before it even started. At first, it was nothing, just footage of Emily and me messing around in the backyard. Then shots of her walking to school, smiling, singing. Just normal teenager stuff. But 22 minutes in, it changed. The camera was shaky. Hidden behind something. You could hear Emily breathing. Whispering to herself. She was in our living room. And then, Uncle Ryan walked in. I'm not going to describe what we saw next. Not in detail. But I'll say this, it was enough. More than enough. Enough for me to stop the tape, grab a trash bin, and throw up. Mira didn't speak for a long time. Just sat there, staring at the blank screen, hands clenched in her lap. When she finally looked at me, she said one thing. We go to the police. Today. I didn't argue. We packed up the tape, the camcorder, the notebook. I made copies of everything. We drove straight to the police station and handed it all in. They took us seriously. Very seriously. And now there's an open investigation. They're looking into Uncle Ryan. They're tracking his movements. They asked if Mira was safe staying with me. I said yes, but honestly, I don't know anymore. Because here's the part one haven't told you yet. This morning, I found something on my porch. No note. No package. Just a single photo. A picture of Mira and me at the gas station from yesterday. Taken from across the street. Someone's watching us, and I think we both know who. I called the detective the second I saw the photo on the porch. He told me to stay calm. That it could be anything, a coincidence, a prank, someone trying to stir fear now that the investigation was active. But I could hear it in his voice. He didn't believe that. Not really. Because it wasn't just a photo. It was dated. Written on the back in shaky, blocky handwriting, yesterday. Cute, aren't you too? I didn't show Mira. Not right away. I couldn't. She was still shaken from the video. She hadn't spoken more than a few words since we left the station. She kept asking if her mom ever said anything else, if she ever warned me. I didn't have the heart to tell her I didn't believe Emily back then. That I thought she was just going through something and she'd come home when she was ready. Now I know she was trying to escape something she couldn't even say out loud. When I finally told Mira about the photo, she didn't freak out. She didn't even flinch. She just nodded. He always found us, she said. No matter where we went. I asked her how many times they'd moved. She said they stopped counting after 13. They changed names, cities, states. Emily worked in diners, cleaned houses, even lived out of a church basement for a few months. Anything to keep moving. To stay small. Invisible. But it never lasted. And every time they got too comfortable, she said the same thing to Mira. Time to go. He knows. Mira said she never understood who he was until she turned 12. That's when Emily sat her down and told her some of the truth. Enough to scare her. Enough to make her obey. But not enough to explain everything. Now she knows. Now we both do. And now, it's too late to hide. The detective assigned to the case called again late last night. He said they've opened a formal investigation into Ryan, and he's officially listed as a person of interest. But that doesn't mean they can arrest him, not yet. They need time. Evidence. A case strong enough to make charges stick. But time is the one thing I don't think we have. Because after I hung up with the detective, I checked my front door camera. I installed it last year, just one of those cheap motion sensor ones from Amazon. It doesn't record constantly, but it captures movement. At 3:14 a.m., the motion light turned on. Someone stood there for less than 5 seconds. Just outside the camera's field of view. I know it sounds paranoid, but I'm not imagining this. I checked the time the photo was dropped on the porch. It was stamped, 3:15 a.m. I didn't sleep after that. Mira didn't either. We just sat in the living room in the dark, the TV off, the hallway light flickering like it always does when the bulb's about to go. We didn't talk. We didn't have to. Because we both felt it. He's coming. We left the house this morning. No warning. No goodbyes. I just grabbed our bags, some cash, the backup copies of the evidence, and we were gone before sunrise. I didn't tell the police, not yet. I didn't want anyone to know where we were going. Mira said that's how her mom always did it. The fewer people who know, the safer we are. It's terrifying how natural this is for her. We drove for hours. No real destination. Just highways and exit signs, choosing turns at random. I switched phones halfway through the trip. Bought a burner at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Mira was quiet the entire ride, watching the trees pass by like they were counting down to something. But it didn't matter how far we drove. He was one step ahead. We stopped at a motel around 5 p.m., small, remote, the kind of place with vending machines older than both of us. I paid in cash, used a fake name. We didn't bring anything traceable. I even left my laptop behind. And yet, when we got to the room, there was something waiting inside. Not a person. A note, folded neatly on the pillow, like it had been there all day. No envelope. No signature. Just 4 words. You always were nosy. That's what Ryan used to say to me when I was a kid. When I'd sneak into the attic to look through old boxes, or eavesdrop on the adults' conversations. It was his favorite thing to whisper when he caught me poking around. I hadn't heard those words in over 20 years. And now they were sitting on a pillow in a motel room we hadn't even booked until 2 hours ago. I nearly screamed. Mira didn't. She picked up the note, read it, and said, "He's been following us since we left your house." She wasn't surprised. Not even a little. She said this was always his pattern. Intimidate, isolate, chase. But he never hurt them. Not directly. He'd just show up, let Emily know he could. That he still had power. She never told Mira why he didn't just take her if that's what he wanted. But Mira had always suspected the same thing. He didn't want custody. He wanted control. Emily once told her, "He doesn't need you. He just needs me scared." I told Mira we needed to leave again, but she shook her head. "No," she said. "Not this time." She pulled something from her backpack, a small USB stick. "There's more," she said. "A lot more." Mom recorded everything. Apparently, Emily had started documenting everything in the last 2 years of her life. She recorded phone calls, wrote detailed notes about past incidents, even copied old messages and hid them in encrypted files. She wasn't just hiding anymore. She was building a case. Mira said she hadn't looked through all of it yet, only enough to know that what we had already given the police was just the surface. The USB was what Emily wanted me to have when the time was right. Mira didn't say what was on it exactly, but she said something that chilled me. Mom believed the only way to stop him was to expose him completely. So that's what we're going to do. Even if it means risking everything. Even if it means he comes for us. We're done running. We waited until midnight to plug it in. The USB. The one Emily left. I didn't want to do it in the motel room. We drove to a 24-hour diner across the state line, one with fluorescent lights, a dozen customers, and enough noise to keep us grounded. I needed people around. I needed noise. I needed to believe he couldn't reach us there. We took a seat at the corner booth. I opened my laptop, Mira handed me the USB, and I hesitated, because deep down, I knew whatever was on there was going to change everything. And it did. The folder was called Journal_Backup. Inside were subfolders labeled by month. And inside those? Hundreds of files, audio recordings, scanned notes, screenshots, even short videos. The first one we opened was an audio file. It was Emily. Her voice sounded tired, slower than I remembered, but clear. Strong. Focused. She started by stating the date, October 11th, 2021. Then she said this: "If something happens to me, if Mira ever brings this to you, it means I didn't make it out. And it means Ryan finally got what he wanted." Then she paused, took a shaky breath. "But it also means it's time to finish what I started." She went on to describe everything, how it began, the manipulation, the control. The first time he touched her. How he convinced her no one would believe her if she ever spoke. How he said she'd ruin the family if she said his name. And then she said my name. "I wanted to tell you. So many times. But you were always the one he watched me around. You were the only person he ever seemed worried about." She said she thought about coming home after she turned 25, when Mira was old enough to understand, but every time she got close, something happened. A strange message. A familiar car. A photo in the mailbox. He never stopped watching. Then came another file. A video. It was a hidden camera, propped on a hotel dresser. Emily was in the frame, sitting on the edge of the bed. She looked worn down but calm. In control. And then a second person entered the room. It was Ryan. Older now. Thinner. But unmistakably him. The video had no audio at first, just footage of them talking. Then, maybe 5 minutes in, the audio cut in mid-sentence. "You really think anyone's going to believe you after all this time?" he said, smirking. "They don't need to believe me," she replied. "I've got proof." He laughed. Mocked her. Said she'd lost everything, family, future, friends. Then he leaned in, got too close, and said something that turned my blood to ice. "You'll always belong to me. You and the girl." That was the moment I knew, this was never going to stop on its own. He didn't just haunt her life, he owned it. The files kept going. There were documents from shelters, letters she wrote but never mailed, one even addressed to me with the words "too risky." "Keep safe," handwritten on the envelope. I looked at Mira. She was pale. Angry. But she didn't cry. She just nodded. "Now we have everything," she whispered. And she was right. We copied the files to 3 drives. One went into my bag. One went in Myra's hoodie pocket. The third we mailed to the detective's personal address with no return name. The second we stepped out of that diner, I knew we weren't just witnesses anymore. We were targets. And then, in the parking lot, on the back window of my car, we saw it. Written in dust, finger traced across the glass. "You shouldn't have watched." There were no cameras in the lot. No other witnesses. No sounds. Just those words. He'd found us. Again. We didn't go back to the motel. After seeing that message on my car, we left it behind. Ditched it in the diner lot and called a rideshare to another town. I wasn't going to risk driving something that clearly had his fingerprints near it. We used cash to check into a different place, a dumpy roadside inn with flickering lights and cigarette burns on the blankets. I didn't care. I just needed 4 walls and a lock. Mira barely spoke. She just sat on the bed, gripping her phone, refreshing the police tip line site over and over like she was expecting to see his name suddenly pop up as in custody. He wasn't. And by morning, it got worse. I woke up to an alert from my old phone, the one I'd left at home. Motion detected, front porch. Timestamp, 5:47 a.m. There was no video. The feed had been disabled. I didn't tell Mira. Instead, I texted the detective from the burner and gave him access to all the files on the USB. I also sent him a short video we hadn't watched yet, one where Emily reads a list of places Ryan used to stay. One of them? Less than 30 minutes from where we were right now. Coincidence? Not a chance. We were being hunted. That afternoon, Mira said something I hadn't expected. I'm done hiding. I told her we had to be smart, that the police were building a case, and that we had to trust the process. She shook her head. You don't get it. He's not going to wait around for a courtroom. If he finds us before they find him, we're dead. Then she pulled something out of her backpack. A small revolver. I don't know how she got it. I didn't ask, but the way she handled it, steady hands, careful fingers, I could tell this wasn't the first time she'd held it. Emily must have taught her. I wanted to tell her she didn't need it, that we'd be okay. But I couldn't lie. So we waited. Another motel. Another name on the check-in sheet. This time, I set alarms on every window, stacked a chair under the door handle, and kept the lights on. We slept in shifts, barely. Until around 3 a.m., when I heard it. A knock. Not a bang. Not pounding. Just 3 gentle taps. Tap, tap, tap. I froze. My phone was in my hand before I realized I'd even moved. I glanced at Mira. She was already standing, gun drawn, eyes locked on the door like she'd been waiting for this. I crept over. Slowly. Quietly. I checked the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness. Then a voice came through the door, soft and calm. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I didn't answer. You don't know what you're doing. You think you're safe in there? You're not. I backed away from the door, heart pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking the walls. Mira was whispering something under her breath, counting maybe? I don't know. All I could do was grab my phone and start recording. The voice spoke again. I can make this disappear. All of it. You just have to stop. Give me the drive. Walk away. Then silence. No footsteps. No car. No sound. When we opened the door 10 minutes later, there was no one there. But lying on the floor? A single house key. Taped to it was a note. Let's end this where it started. The address on the back? Our childhood home. The one Emily left behind forever. We called the police. They're sending someone. Finally. A full unit. The detective said this is the break they needed, physical proof that he's approaching us, threatening us. But here's the part one can't explain. That house? It's been abandoned for 6 years. No one owns it. No one should even have a key. And yet, he does. We didn't go during the day. That house wasn't meant for daylight. We waited until after sunset. The police said they'd be there to sweep the place before we arrived, but the detective called me an hour before and said they were delayed, something about jurisdiction issues and needing to coordinate with local authorities. Classic red tape. Mira didn't care. She was already in the car. This ends tonight, she said. So we went. The drive to our old house was quiet. Familiar roads twisted in ways I hadn't remembered. The trees were overgrown. The streetlights, dimmer. It was like the whole neighborhood had slipped into a version of itself that belonged to ghosts. And when we pulled up to the house, I nearly turned the car around. Because the porch light was on. No one lives there. No electricity should even be running. But the porch light glowed like it had never stopped, casting a pale circle across the walkway where we used to play hopscotch as kids. I parked down the block. Mira tucked the gun into her coat and handed me a flashlight. Neither of us said a word. I think we both knew this wasn't about finding new evidence. This was about closure. Or a trap. The key he left fit the door like it had never left. And when it opened, I swear the air inside was colder than outside. Dust covered every surface. Furniture sat in the exact spots we left them in a decade ago. My old soccer trophy was still on the mantel. A cracked family portrait leaned against the wall. The house was untouched, and somehow watching. Mira moved first. Straight down the hall. Toward Emily's old room. I followed, flashlight sweeping every corner, half expecting to see him crouched behind a door, waiting. But there was no one. Emily's room was empty. Not stripped, just bare. The way it looked when she left. On the wall, above her dresser, something caught Myra's eye. Scratches. 4 vertical lines, etched deep into the paint. and beneath them, a fifth crossing through, a tally. She ran her fingers over them, then looked at me. She said she used to count the nights he came into her room, she whispered. I didn't think she meant literally. I felt sick. But Mira wasn't done. She reached under the floor vent, tugged something loose. A box, dusty, metal, locked with a padlock. She pulled out a key from her pocket, the second item Emily gave her before she died. It clicked open. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to me. None mailed. I pulled one out at random. It was dated just 2 years after she vanished. I wanted to call you today. Just to hear your voice. But I didn't. Because I saw his car again. Because I know the second I try to come home, he'll know. And if he knows, she's not safe. I didn't even realize I was crying until Mira put a hand on my arm. We were still kneeling on the floor when we heard it. A creak. From the second floor. We froze. No one had followed us in. We checked every room. But now, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. I reached for my phone. It buzzed the second I touched it. Unknown number. One new text. Thought you might come. Want to see how much she told you. Mira had already pulled the gun. The footsteps stopped. And then, bang. Not a shot. A door. Upstairs. Something, or someone, was in the house. We ran. Out the front door, across the lawn, into the street. I called 911, breathless. Told them we had evidence that someone was inside. Cops were there in 4 minutes. They swept the house. Found no one. But they did find something in the attic. A sleeping bag. A flashlight. An envelope full of printed photos. Of us. At the motel. At the diner. At the police station. All recent. All taken without our knowledge. And one more. A photo of Emily. Lying in bed. Eyes open. Staring straight into the camera. She'd taken it herself. On the back, in faded ink, it said. He said if I disappear, the house will remember everything. We left the house that night for the last time. And as we drove away, I swear I saw the porch light flicker once, then die. The detective called us the next morning. They had him. Ryan was picked up crossing into Pennsylvania, driving a rented SUV with fake plates. Inside were multiple burner phones, a duffel bag filled with surveillance gear, and, what finally did it, a folder of photos. Some of Mira. Some of me. Some dated years back. Proof of long-term stalking. The USB, the letters, the motel threats, the footage, the attic, every piece finally tied together. There was enough now to move forward with full charges. Sexual assault, stalking, possession of illicit surveillance material, threats, harassment, and likely more as the investigation continues. But even with that, after 10 years of chasing shadows, living like prey, Mira didn't react the way I expected. She didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just asked, "Are we safe now?" And I couldn't answer right away. Because what Emily left behind, the scars, the stories, the sleepless nights, that doesn't just disappear when the monster is caged. It lingers. We spent the next few days handing over every last piece of evidence. Letters. Notes. Even the ones too painful to read. The detective assigned to the case promised they'd treat Emily's words like testimony. They said Mira might be able to submit a victim statement in court. But before we left town, before we shut the door on this part of our lives for good, Mira asked to go back to the house. One more time. I was hesitant. Terrified, honestly. But she said she had to do it. So we went. Midday. Cops in the driveway. Windows open. Safe. She walked straight to Emily's room. She stood in the doorway for a long time. Then she whispered something I couldn't hear. And placed something on the floor. It was the photo Emily had taken of herself. The one we found in the attic. She left it there. Just like that. When I asked her why, she said. Because she was never just running from him. She was running toward this moment. Toward justice. And now she's home. We left the house together. Got in the car. And didn't look back. It's been 6 weeks. Ryan's still in custody. No bail. The DA is pushing for a full trial, but the evidence is overwhelming. I've spoken with prosecutors. With therapists. With survivors. We're starting to understand this wasn't just one family's secret. He had patterns. Victims. A history that slipped through cracks for decades. But no more. Not with Emily's voice echoing through every page, every file, every whispered warning she left behind. She saved her daughter. She saved herself, just long enough to build a map we could follow. And now? Now we're healing. Myra's starting school in the fall. She wants to study psychology. She says she wants to help other girls like her mom. Like her. I'm still processing everything, still having dreams, still checking locks twice before I go to bed. But I'm not afraid anymore. Because the truth came out. Because the light stayed on, even in the dark. Because sometimes, the story doesn't end with running. Sometimes, the ending is facing the monster and surviving him. And that's what we did.